Zephyros had never imagined he would become a beggar among the stars. The massive dragon's scales, once a brilliant emerald that caught light like precious gems, had dulled to the color of old moss. His wings, span wide enough to cast shadows over small cities, now hung close to his serpentine body as he approached yet another space station. The Catherian Collective's orbital platform gleamed like a crystal chandelier against the backdrop of their twin suns. Ships of impossible beauty danced around the structure in perfect synchronization, their hulls singing harmonious frequencies that made even the vacuum of space seem musical. Zephyros had heard stories of Catherian generosity, their advanced civilization built on principles of artistic expression and cosmic harmony. "Please," Zephyros transmitted through the quantum communicator that barely functioned anymore, its organic components failing after months of constant use. "I seek sanctuary. My people are dead. My world is ash. I have knowledge that could benefit your civilization." The response came swiftly, melodious voices blending together like a choir. "We have scanned your biological signature, creature. Your species carries the genetic markers of the Void Wars. The ancient texts speak of your kind's violence, your tendency toward destruction. We cannot allow such chaos to enter our harmonious society." "That was 10,000 years ago," Zephyros pleaded, his mental voice cracking with exhaustion. "I am not my ancestors. I am a scholar, a keeper of lost sciences. I only seek a place to share what I know before it dies with me. The risk is too great. Depart, dragon. Find sanctuary elsewhere." The massive doors of the docking bay remained sealed. Ships continued their dance, but now they formed a barrier between Zephyros and the station. He had no choice but to move on, his heart growing heavier with each rejection. The second door belonged to the hegemony of Zerion, a militaristic empire that controlled 3 star systems through superior technology and unwavering discipline. Their fortress worlds bristled with weapons that could crack planets, and their fleets had never known defeat. Surely a warrior culture would appreciate the tactical knowledge he possessed. Admiral Corvin's hologram materialized in front of Zephyros's ship, the human-like alien's purple skin marked with ritual scars that spoke of countless victories. "Dragon, your reputation precedes you. We know of your species' combat capabilities." Hope flared in Zephyros's chest. "Then you understand my value. I carry within my memory the complete military histories of 17 extinct civilizations, battle strategies that could threaten our supremacy," Corvin interrupted. "We have built our empire on the principle that only the Zerion are worthy to rule. Your knowledge might give our enemies advantages we cannot allow. You are too dangerous to ally with, too powerful to trust. I offer no threat. I am the last of my kind. And that makes you even more dangerous. A creature with nothing left to lose has no limits to what it might do. Begone, before we decide you pose an active threat to our security." The third rejection came from the Nexus Confederation, a democratic alliance of 12 species that prided themselves on equality and justice. Their representatives, a council of beings from different worlds, listened to his plea with what seemed like genuine consideration. "Your request is not without merit," said Councillor Thane, her crystalline form shimmering with empathy. "However, we must consider the will of our citizens. A referendum on accepting a being of your considerable size and capabilities would take at least 6 standard months. Even then, the historical precedent of your species suggests the vote would not pass." "I do not ask for citizenship," Zephyros said, struggling to keep desperation from his voice. "Only shelter while I transfer my knowledge to your archives. The legal implications are complex. Housing a being of mass destruction capability, even temporarily, would require unanimous consent from all member worlds. I'm afraid the Zerath delegation has already expressed concerns about your presence in Confederation space." The fourth door belonged to the Solani Empire, masters of biotechnology who had transcended their organic origins. Their living ships pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as they surrounded Zephyros, scanning him with tendrils that felt like gentle touches against his scales. "Fascinating," whispered the Overmind, a collective consciousness that spoke through 1,000 voices. "Your biological matrix shows evidence of genetic modification far beyond our current capabilities. You could teach us much about bioenhancement." For a moment, Zephyros dared to hope. "Yes, my people were masters of biological science. I carry within me the genetic templates of creatures thought impossible." "Indeed, which is why you must be preserved for study. We offer you sanctuary, dragon, but you would exist as a subject for our research. Your consent, while appreciated, is not required. Our laws regarding non-citizen entities are quite clear. You would make me a prisoner in all but name. You would be fed, sheltered, and cared for. Many would consider it generous." Zephyros fled before they could activate whatever containment measures they surely had prepared. Better to die free among the stars than live as a specimen in a laboratory. The fifth civilization, the hegemony of the Golden Spiral, received his message but never responded. Their perfect geometric ships simply formed a wall when he approached their territory, weapons charging with silent menace until he withdrew. The sixth were the Wandering Courts, nomadic fleets that traveled between dimensions. Their response was cryptic. "Your timeline bears the weight of genocide, Star Dragon. We cannot risk the paradox contamination that your presence might bring to our dimensional matrices. The fates have spoken against you." The seventh rejection came from the ecumene of transcended minds, post-physical beings who existed as pure consciousness within quantum computers. "Your material form is incompatible with our realm, flesh-bound one. We have moved beyond such crude existence. Seek those still trapped in matter." The eighth door was perhaps the most painful. The Harmony Collective, descendants of Earth's early colonists, looked human enough that Zephyros felt a strange kinship with them. They had spread across dozens of worlds, building a society based on collective well-being and shared prosperity. "We sympathize with your plight, truly," said Director Chen, her weathered face showing genuine sadness. "But our colonies are still fragile. Our terraforming efforts could be disrupted by your presence. A single accident with your flame breath could destroy years of ecological work. I swear by the ashes of my homeworld that I would never—" "Swears can be broken, even with the best intentions. We've seen what happens when powerful beings lose control during emotional distress. I'm sorry, but the risk to our million colonists outweighs our desire to help one individual." The ninth and most bitter rejection came from the Eternal Assembly, an alliance of the galaxy's oldest and supposedly wisest civilizations. They had existed for millions of years, had seen the rise and fall of countless species. "Child of destruction," intoned the Prime Ancient, a being so old its species had forgotten their original form and existed now as patterns of living energy. "We have watched your kind before. You are the inheritors of the flame that consumes. In time, no matter your intentions, you will bring ruin to those who shelter you. It is your nature." "My nature is what I choose it to be," Zephyros said, but even he could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "You believe that now. They all did. But nature will assert itself, as it always does. We will not enable another galactic catastrophe by showing mercy to one who carries the seed of darkness within him." Zephyros drifted in space after the ninth rejection, his ship's systems failing, his hope nearly extinguished. He had traveled for months, crossing half the galaxy, seeking nothing more than a chance to share the accumulated knowledge of his people before it died with him. Every door had closed, every hand had turned away. He thought of the great libraries of his homeworld, now cosmic dust. He remembered the songs of his people, melodies that could make stars weep with beauty, lost forever except in his failing memory. The scientific discoveries that had taken millennia to achieve would die when his heart finally stopped beating. Perhaps they were right to turn him away. Perhaps he was cursed, tainted by the sins of ancestors he had never known. Perhaps the galaxy would be safer without him. His sensors detected a small yellow star in the distance. According to his star charts, it was home to a young species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. They called themselves humans. They would likely be no different from the others, but he had nowhere else to go. With the last of his ship's power, Zephyros set course for the third planet from that ordinary star. Earth, the humans called it. He would make his final plea there, and when they too turned him away, he would drift into the void and let the cold of space claim him at last. At least then, the rejection would finally end. The approaching vessel registered on Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Network as an anomaly that made Chief Communications Officer Sarah Chen sit up straighter in her chair. The contact was massive, biological in nature, and broadcasting distress signals in 17 different galactic languages. "Director Morrison, you need to see this," she called across the command center of the Sol Defense platform. The orbital station, humanity's first major step into galactic politics, buzzed with activity as the night shift processed routine shipping manifests and diplomatic communications. Director James Morrison, a weathered man who had seen humanity's first contact with alien civilizations 20 years ago, studied the readings with growing amazement. "That energy signature, it's not matching any known ship design in our databases. Sir, the being is attempting communication, audio and psychic frequencies. It's requesting sanctuary." Morrison frowned. In the 2 decades since first contact, Earth had become something of a backwater planet in galactic politics. Most alien civilizations viewed humans as interesting, but ultimately insignificant newcomers to the cosmic community. They traded with humanity for exotic resources and cultural curiosities, but no one had ever sought sanctuary here. "Put it through. All channels." The voice that filled the command center carried the weight of exhaustion and desperate hope. Despite speaking through universal translators, something in the tone suggested enormous intelligence and equally enormous pain. "People of Earth, I am Zephyros, last survivor of the Draconis Stellaris. I come seeking nothing more than temporary shelter while I transfer the knowledge of my people to your archives. I have been to 9 civilizations before yours. All have turned me away." Morrison exchanged glances with his communications team. "Sir," Chen whispered, "our cultural database shows dragons in human mythology. This could be where those legends originated." "Zephyros," Morrison responded, activating the main communication array. "This is Director Morrison of the Sol Defense platform. You're requesting sanctuary. What exactly are you fleeing from?" "Nothing now. My world was destroyed by a cosmic plague 3 months ago. The stellar blight consumed everything organic on my planet in a matter of days. I escaped only because I was off-world at the time, conducting research at our Deep Space Observatory." The sensor readings were staggering. The creature was over 200 meters long, with an energy output that suggested it could level mountains if it chose to. Yet the distress in its voice seemed genuine. "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Rodriguez from the tactical station, "I'm picking up massive system failures in its ship. Life support is critical, propulsion is offline, and whatever's keeping that thing alive is running on emergency power." Morrison made a decision that would change everything. "Zephyros, we're sending a rescue shuttle to your position. Our medical teams will need some time to prepare for a being of your size, but we have facilities that can accommodate you." The silence that followed lasted so long that Morrison wondered if the communication link had failed. You would help me? Without knowing what I am? Without demanding payment or service in return? You said you're dying, and you need help. That's enough for us." Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's leading xenobiologist, had seen many strange things in her career, but nothing had prepared her for Zephyros. The dragon's ship, barely holding together, had been carefully guided to Luna Base, humanity's largest off-world facility. The hangar bay had been cleared and pressurized with an atmosphere suitable for most oxygen-breathing species. When Zephyros emerged from his failing vessel, even the hardened base personnel stopped their work to stare. He moved with liquid grace despite his obvious exhaustion, scales shimmering with colors that seemed to shift based on his emotional state. His eyes, larger than human heads, held intelligence that was immediately apparent to anyone who met his gaze. "I have not stood in gravity for many cycles," Zephyros said, his voice now coming from his actual throat rather than through ship communicators. It was a sound like distant thunder, but controlled with careful modulation to avoid harming human hearing. "Take your time," Dr. Vasquez said, approaching without fear. Her team had prepared biocompatible nutrition packs and medical scanners adapted for his physiology. "We've set up a recovery area. Our initial scans suggest you're suffering from severe nutritional deficiency and exhaustion. You scan me without permission?" Dr. Vasquez paused, realizing the potential breach of protocol. "I apologize. We wanted to help, but you're right to call out our presumption. May we have permission to monitor your health?" Something shifted in Zephyros's massive eyes. In all his travels, no species had asked his permission for anything. They had either demanded compliance or refused interaction entirely. "You may..." I had forgotten what courtesy felt like. The next few days revealed the true scope of what humanity was dealing with. Zephyros was not merely intelligent. He was a living repository of knowledge that spanned thousands of years and dozens of civilizations. His people had been the galaxy's memory keepers, traveling between stars to record histories, preserve dying languages, and maintain the scientific achievements of species that might otherwise be lost to time. "My ancestors were indeed violent," Zephyros explained to a gathered council of Earth's top scientists and diplomats. 10,000 years ago, we conquered through force and ruled through fear. But we learned, we evolved beyond our violent nature and dedicated ourselves to preservation rather than destruction." Dr. Margaret Foster, Earth's leading historian, leaned forward with intense interest. "The knowledge you carry? Civilizations that existed before recorded galactic history? The builders who created the hyperspace lanes, the singers whose music could manipulate gravity, the gardeners who seeded barren worlds with life that still flourishes today. 17 species whose technologies could revolutionize your understanding of physics, medicine, and engineering." Director Morrison, present for this first formal meeting, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Why did the other civilizations refuse you?" "This knowledge could benefit everyone." Zephyros's scales darkened with what they were learning to recognize as sadness. "Fear, mostly. My species has a reputation for destruction that precedes any individual dragon. Some civilizations worried I might use their resources to seek revenge for my people's extinction. Others believed that sharing such knowledge with a potentially vengeful being would upset the balance of power in the galaxy. And others thought me too dangerous to be allowed free movement. The Solani wanted to imprison me for study. The Nexus Confederation was concerned about legal precedent. The Harmony Collective worried about environmental damage." He paused, his massive head lowering slightly. Each had reasons that made sense from their perspective. Captain Rosa Silva, Earth's military representative, spoke carefully. "And what makes you think we'll be different? We're one of the youngest species in galactic politics. We don't have the power or resources of those other civilizations." Zephyros considered this for a long moment. "Perhaps that is why you might succeed where others failed. You have not yet learned to be afraid of every possibility. You have not yet built so much that you fear losing it to change. Dr. Vasquez had been monitoring Zephyros's biological readings throughout the conversation. Your stress indicators are spiking. How long has it been since you've had a proper rest cycle? I dare not sleep deeply. Too many civilizations have changed their minds about unwelcome guests while they were unconscious. You're safe here, Morrison said firmly. We're not going to drug you or imprison you while you sleep. You have my word. The word of humans I do not yet know. Why should I trust it? Dr. Foster, who had been studying ancient Earth texts, spoke up quietly. Because in our oldest stories, dragons were not just destroyers, they were guardians of knowledge, keepers of wisdom. Maybe those stories exist because we knew, somehow, that this day would come. That night, for the first time in months, Zephyros allowed himself to enter deep sleep. Human guards maintained their posts, not to keep him contained, but to ensure his rest remained undisturbed. Dr. Vasquez's medical team monitored his vital signs remotely, ready to respond to any health crisis. When he woke 16 hours later, refreshed for the first time since fleeing his dying world, Zephyros found a small gift waiting near his resting area. A simple wooden carving of a dragon, crafted by one of the base engineers during the night shift. It was primitive by the standards of galactic art, but it captured something the dragon had not seen in any representation of his species. Not a monster or a weapon, but a creature of dignity and grace. The engineer, a young woman named Lisa Park, was working nearby when Zephyros discovered the carving. I hope you don't mind, she said, looking up from her maintenance console. I couldn't sleep, and I thought you might like something to remind you that not everyone sees your kind as a threat. Zephyros carefully picked up the carving with one massive claw, studying the careful detail work. You made this for me, without being asked, without expecting payment. You looked so sad yesterday. Nobody should face the universe alone. It was a simple statement, made by someone who probably had no idea she was speaking to one of the most knowledgeable beings in the galaxy. But in that moment, Zephyros understood why the humans might be different from every other civilization he had encountered. They saw him first as a person in need, and only second as a potentially dangerous alien. The implications of that perspective would soon ripple across the galaxy in ways none of them could yet imagine. 3 months after Zephyros's arrival, Earth had become the center of the greatest scientific revolution in galactic history. The dragon had not merely shared his knowledge. He had become humanity's first true partner among the stars. The breakthrough came when Dr. Elena Vasquez made a suggestion that stunned everyone present at the weekly progress meeting. What if we don't just record Zephyros's knowledge? What if we help him continue his people's mission? Zephyros, who had grown comfortable attending these gatherings in person rather than through remote communication, tilted his massive head thoughtfully. You would help me preserve the knowledge of other dying civilizations, even those who turned me away? Knowledge belongs to everyone, said Dr. Foster, surrounded by data tablets containing histories that rewrote everything humanity thought it knew about galactic civilization. If we're going to be responsible for these discoveries, we should be responsible for preserving what's being lost elsewhere too. Director Morrison, whose hair had grown noticeably grayer from the stress of managing humanity's sudden prominence in galactic affairs, nodded slowly. We'd need ships capable of deep space travel, diplomatic credentials to approach other species, and storage capacity for information beyond anything we've ever attempted. I can provide the ship designs, Zephyros offered. My people's vessels were built for exactly this purpose, and I know which civilizations are currently facing extinction-level events. The first joint human-dragon expedition launched 6 weeks later. The ship was a marvel of hybrid technology, combining human engineering ingenuity with draconic knowledge systems. Captain Rosa Silva commanded the vessel, while Zephyros served as both guide and cultural ambassador. Their first stop was the Whispering Moons of Keth, where the last members of the Silence Keepers were dying from a plague that destroyed their telepathic abilities. For a species that communicated entirely through shared thoughts, the loss was equivalent to going deaf and blind simultaneously. "We've come to preserve your people's heritage," Silva announced to the gathered keepers, their translucent forms flickering with barely controlled emotion. "Why?" asked their eldest, her mental voice weak and fractured. "We refused the dragon when he sought sanctuary among the stars. Why would you help those who showed him no kindness?" Zephyros answered before the captain could speak. "Because that is what preservation means. It is not about who deserves to be remembered. It is about ensuring that wisdom survives beyond the span of any individual life." The Silence Keepers wept tears that sparkled like liquid crystal as they shared their accumulated knowledge of mental communion across space and time. Techniques for telepathic communication that could revolutionize human understanding of consciousness itself. Word of the joint expeditions spread across the galaxy faster than the ships themselves could travel. The Catherian Collective, who had been the first to refuse Zephyros' sanctuary, sent a formal request for a meeting. "We wish to understand," said their lead harmonist, her musical voice carrying undertones of confusion and regret. "You risk your ships and your people to preserve knowledge that may never benefit your species directly. This behavior does not match our calculations for optimal civilization development." Dr. Vasquez, who had become Earth's primary liaison for these meetings, smiled patiently. "Maybe that's because we're not calculating for optimization. We're acting on principle. Explain this principle. Knowledge and beauty shouldn't die just because their creators do. Zephyros taught us that preservation is its own reward. We're not doing this for profit or advantage. We're doing it because it's right." The Catherians' harmonic frequencies shifted to express deep bewilderment. Their entire society was built on calculated aesthetic optimization. The concept of acting without measurable benefit challenged their fundamental worldview. The hegemony of Zerion was less diplomatically polite in their inquiries. "You harbor a creature capable of destroying battle fleets," Admiral Corvin accused during a tense subspace communication. "You give it access to your technology and your trust. This appears to be either stunning naivety or a clever deception hiding military preparations." Captain Silva, who had grown considerably more confident in interspecies diplomacy, responded calmly. "Admiral, Zephyros has been on Earth for 5 months. He's had access to our defensive systems, our fleet compositions, and our strategic planning. If he intended harm, don't you think he would have acted by now? Perhaps he waits for optimal conditions. Or perhaps you're projecting your own paranoia onto a situation you don't understand. Zephyros isn't our prisoner or our weapon. He's our friend. We realize that's a concept your military hierarchy might find difficult to process." The communication ended abruptly, but Earth's intelligence services reported unusual activity in Zerion space. Their fleets were repositioning, not for attack, but to monitor the human expeditions from a distance. They were learning that humanity's approach to the dragon was producing results their military calculations had deemed impossible. The most significant change came from the Nexus Confederation. 6 months after their original refusal, they sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth with an unprecedented request. "We wish to formally invite Zephyros to establish residence within Confederation space," announced Counselor Thane, her crystalline form more subdued than during their previous interaction. "Our legal scholars have developed a framework that would grant him full citizen rights while ensuring democratic oversight of his activities." Morrison, who had become Earth's de facto ambassador to the galactic community, exchanged glances with Zephyros before responding. "That's generous of you, Counselor. What changed your minds?" The knowledge preservation missions have saved 3 civilizations from complete cultural extinction in the past 4 months. The Whispering Keepers of Keth, the Archive Builders of Zoran, and the Dream Singers of the Crystal Nebula. All of them now have their essential knowledge stored in multiple locations, protected by joint human-dragon expeditions. Thane paused, her form flickering with what humans had learned to recognize as embarrassment. Our calculations suggest that Zephyros's knowledge, combined with your species' willingness to act altruistically, represents the most significant cultural preservation effort in recorded galactic history. We may have made an error in our initial assessment. Zephyros spoke for the first time during the meeting, his voice carrying gentle amusement. Counselor, I appreciate the offer, but I have found my home among the humans. They offered me sanctuary when I was dying and friendless. They trusted me when no one else would. Why would I leave such companions? But we can offer you resources that a young species like humanity cannot provide. Advanced facilities, established diplomatic networks, guaranteed protection. And in return, you would want oversight of my activities, democratic committees to approve each preservation mission, legal frameworks to ensure I remain controlled. Thane's form flickered again. Well, yes. Responsible governance requires... The humans asked for nothing but the chance to help. They gave their trust freely and have honored it completely. Why would I trade such friendship for comfortable supervision? The real revelation came during the 8th preservation mission, when the expedition arrived at the ruins of Zerion's ancient enemy, the Teclon Empire. The Teclon had been extinct for centuries, victims of a war with the Zerion that had scorched 12 star systems and left nothing but dead worlds and drifting debris. There, Zephyros said softly, pointing one massive claw at a derelict space station orbiting a burned planet. The last archive of the Teclon Imperial Library. I had hoped to preserve it during my first travels, but the Zerion blockade prevented access. Captain Silva studied the tactical display. The area is still monitored by automated defense platforms, Zerion Tech, designed to prevent anyone from accessing Teclon ruins. They wanted to ensure their enemies remained completely erased, Dr. Foster added grimly. Total cultural genocide. Not if we can help it, Silva said, activating the communications array. This is the human vessel memoriam to Admiral Corvin of the Zerion hegemony. We request permission to enter the restricted zone for knowledge preservation purposes. The response came swiftly and predictably. Permission denied. The Teclon archive contains potentially dangerous military intelligence. Admiral, Zephyros himself took control of the communication. I have worked with the humans for 7 months. They have shown no interest in military applications of preserved knowledge. They seek only to prevent the complete loss of cultural heritage. The dragon speaks for the humans now. Corvin's voice carried dangerous undertones. This confirms our suspicions about their true intentions. Silva cut back in. Our intentions are exactly what we've always stated them to be. We're going to preserve what's left of Teclon culture before it's lost forever. You can try to stop us, or you can finally understand that some things matter more than military advantage. The human ship moved toward the archive despite the warning shots from automated platforms. Zephyros used his knowledge of ancient Teclon systems to safely navigate the defenses, while human engineers worked frantically to extract data cores before Zerion reinforcements could arrive. They succeeded in downloading the complete cultural archives of an entire civilization that had been deliberately erased from galactic memory. Art, literature, scientific discoveries, and philosophical works that predated the Zerion Empire itself. When Admiral Corvin's fleet arrived, ready to enforce their blockade with military force, they found the human ship already broadcasting Teclon poetry across all communication frequencies. Music that had been silenced for centuries filled the space between the fleets, beautiful and haunting, and completely without military value. "Why?" Corvin asked, his voice no longer carrying its usual aggressive certainty. "Why risk conflict with our forces for the sake of dead enemies?" "Because they weren't just your enemies," Dr. Foster replied, her voice carrying across the void with quiet dignity. "They were people. They created beauty and knowledge and love just like any species. That deserves to survive regardless of politics." For the first time in his military career, Admiral Corvin ordered his fleet to stand down without achieving their tactical objective. As his ships withdrew, he opened a private communication channel to the human vessel. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we have been thinking about strength in the wrong way." 1 year after Zephyros's arrival on Earth, the galactic community had been transformed. The joint preservation missions had saved the cultural heritage of dozens of dying civilizations. Human ships, guided by dragon wisdom, had become symbols of hope for species facing extinction. But the greatest change was in how the major powers viewed both humanity and each other. The Catherian Collective had begun sending artists to work alongside human preservation teams, creating new harmonic compositions from rescued alien music. The Nexus Confederation had established the Zephyros Protocols, ensuring legal protection for any being seeking sanctuary while preserving cultural knowledge. Even the Xerion hegemony had quietly begun funding preservation missions, though they maintained this was purely for intelligence-gathering purposes. Zephyros, standing in the observation deck of Luna Base and looking out at the stars, reflected on the journey that had brought him from desperate refugee to honored partner. Earthships moved through the void carrying missions of hope rather than conquest. Human crews worked alongside alien scholars to preserve the treasures of civilizations they had never met. "Any regrets?" Dr. Vasquez asked, joining him at the viewing window. "Only one," Zephyros replied, his voice soft with wonder. "I regret that it took me 9 rejections to find the one species wise enough to understand that strength and kindness are not opposing forces." "Maybe that's not a regret," Elena suggested. "Maybe that's just how destiny works. The right door opens when you most need it to." Zephyros considered this, watching as a human freighter passed by carrying Teclon poetry to the far reaches of the galaxy, ensuring that voices silenced by war would sing again among the stars. "Perhaps you are right, my friend. Perhaps the 10th door was always meant to be the one that mattered most." Behind them, Earth turned slowly in the void. A small blue world that had become the beating heart of the galaxy's greatest preservation effort. Not because it was the strongest or the oldest or the most advanced, but because when a dying dragon had knocked on their door, humans had simply opened it and said, "Welcome home."